But I've started to believe that the best boundaries are the boundaries that help us show up the way we want to show up, to embody the person that we want to be, to embody our highest selves. How do you react in certain situations? How do you behave? How do you interact with other people in tough situations? Those are your best opportunities to show yourself who you really are and who you really can be. But if you really are trying to reach people, you really do want to affect change, you really do think that something like peace and unity is possible, then it's absolutely necessary that you consider how you're sharing your message. Welcome to the Energy Within podcast, helping you to embrace your weirdness, beat imposter syndrome, and take action on your soul's purpose. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki master teacher, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this is episode 178. I am still recording on my phone. One day I'll be able to set up my podcasting equipment again. And I was going to record in the car like I normally do, but it was raining so hard today. It would have been so loud and so distracting in the background, even worse than any car noise or anything like that. So here I am at the gym after my grit class. And I know I said the last one was going to be the last one in the boundaries series, but we got to talk about boundaries one more time. And here we go. I feel like my throat chakra is starting to open. I even listened to a podcast about allowing your throat chakra to open. And all of a sudden, here we are. And I'm feeling, the shifts in energy and whatever's going on collectively. Today was just not a bad day by any means, but just odd. My energy was very up and down. I was very affected by external energies. I made the mistake of scrolling longer than I probably should have through social media. I'm finding that I'm almost annoyed with myself when I keep defaulting to going to social media instead of doing something productive or healthier, because I don't want to be telling myself that I always have to be productive necessarily, but even scrolling social media, I'm thankful actually for this guy. I can't remember the name of the account off the top of my head, but it's the second time I came across one of his videos over the weekend, and I did follow his account now finally, but the videos that I've seen from him all start off basically with, "Congratulations, you've reached your last video of the day." And every time, even though it's only been twice, but every time I've come across one of those videos from him, I've stopped because I've been like, oh my God, yes, I have been sitting here scrolling for way, way too long. And social media can be a fun place. It can be very entertaining. And it can also be very negative and very draining. So I think I need to put up some energy protection boundaries for myself before I start scrolling, because something else is shifting with me where I feel like I'm becoming more and more affected by outside energies, almost like I've let my guard down a little bit, and there's a part of me that's okay with that. I'm okay with actually feeling a little bit more, because I feel like I did put up, not walls really, some shields, like I used to talk about walls versus shields, just to power through stuff that had been going on in my life. Not that anything was overwhelmingly terrible, but, having 2 little kids, that can be stressful, especially if one of them's really colicky, and just life changes, moving into a new house, just a lot of stuff going on. And you just kind of sometimes have to power through it and get done what needs to be done, and you don't really give yourself the time to feel anything. So I feel like I'm starting to feel a little bit more, and I feel like I'm also shifting more into that energy that I was talking about earlier this year about not taking any more of my own BS, standing up for what I want for myself more, and now really starting to open my throat chakra and say things that I actually want to say. Because there have been so many times that I've opened up my social media, I've thought about recording a story about certain topics, or maybe I did record it, and then I never published it because I'm like, because I don't want to say I'm afraid of arguing with people. I'm not really afraid of it. I feel like I can handle it. I just don't want to. I have no desire, no time, no energy, no patience to argue with people. Intelligent, open, kind, civil discussions, sure. But I have no desire to argue with anybody because I don't feel like arguing ever changes anybody's mind. It just makes everybody upset because in arguing, you're just trying to be right. You're trying to prove the other person wrong. And in the end, that's not what helps. It's like I've said all along about everything. The best you can do to create real, actual, lasting change when you're trying to affect other people or create change in the world, you can't force that on anybody. You just can't. As much as we might want to, it's not possible. You can plant seeds, but I also don't think that you do that rudely for them to take roots. You need to do it gently. And I'm not trying to preach. I'm not trying to say I've got it right or I'm perfect at this by any means. I'm figuring this all out in real time along with you and just posing my thoughts. That's all it is. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. Like I always say, I'm not here to tell you what you should be thinking, what you should be doing, what you should believe. I know for a fact that we all have different beliefs here. The question is, can everybody in this world get along knowing that other people have different beliefs? Now, I'm not getting into any specific issues here. I'm not talking about grand scale global problems. I'm really more talking about how we all interact with each other. What sparked this is what had kind of brought me down was seeing a couple social media posts in a row that were the opposite of my beliefs, which is fine. I'm not saying that's the problem. The problem was how they were posed. And again, I promise I'm really not trying to come across as preachy whatsoever. I'm just being honest. So if you happen to catch my mini little rant, I wasn't going off, but I was just talking about how I was feeling on Monday on my Instagram. It did transfer to Facebook too, so you could have seen it on Facebook. In every kind of conversation, in every kind of interaction, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it that's important for the message to be received the way that you would like it to be received. What bothers me, if I'm being completely honest, is a couple of things, actually. So, first of all, I'm not saying I don't laugh at a good meme. I don't necessarily share all of the kinds of memes that I will chuckle at on my social media because it's not really part of my messaging or my branding or what I want to be sharing. But I might share it with a friend. As much as I try my best to be neutral, that doesn't mean that in my own life I don't have a position. I have a position. I know what my beliefs are. And I'd like to say all of them are pretty unshakable. And you're probably the same way. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the goal, is to be sure of who you are and be sure of what you believe in. Because that equals the freedom to really be yourself. But it's become hard to share our thoughts because it seems like everybody's offended about everything these days. But anyway, the memes. So here again, I just want to make this abundantly clear what I'm saying. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm not trying to preach to anybody. I'm just presenting my thoughts, posing some questions. I'm not a fan of what I'm starting to call gotcha memes, where people are trying to share their position on something by sharing a meme that seems to have summed up the opposite side's position on something in this neat little sentence or this cute little meme that would make someone probably go, ha, I got you now. You can't say anything back to that. I figured this out. You can't argue against that. Well, actually, the other side probably can argue against that, because we should all know from experience that it's impossible, completely impossible, to accurately and completely sum up a belief you have, why you have that belief, in a social media post, or even a longer blog post, even in a podcast, because there's always going to be details, even unintentionally, left out. Because you could get a whole group of people together that share the same belief, but their reasons and their experiences, their perceptions, their family life, everything that has happened uniquely to them, the unique combination that forms them, is what's leading them to that belief. So it's not always the same. And by trying to summarize the other side, you know even less. You know why you have that belief. You don't necessarily know, though, why the person next to you who agrees with you has that same belief, or how strongly they even hold that belief. And you definitely don't know what goes into the other side, especially if you're trying to sum it up and be like, aha, I gotcha. That's not helping anybody. In my opinion, that's a combination of belittling and shame. And you don't get anybody to change by belittling them or shaming them. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm preaching. I don't mean to. I'm just saying I know that doesn't work. So share what you want to your social media. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm not trying to tell you that you have to change anything or that you're even necessarily doing anything wrong. But if you really are trying to reach people, you really do want to affect change, you really do think that something like peace and unity is possible, then it's absolutely necessary that you consider how you're sharing your message. And you can think what you want, but I'm convinced that belittling and shaming is not the way. And then so we're going to go into, this is where we're getting into a little bit more boundaries here. So in the Boundaries Intensive, the Supported Feminine, that just occurred this last weekend, first of all, it was so awesome. I'm so glad we did it. And it will be available if it's something that you would like to incorporate more into your life, making sure you set not only the right boundaries for yourself, but that you have a plan ready to help you enforce them. But what came up leading into me running this, and the way I actually ended up positioning it, is oftentimes we look at boundaries strictly as a line in the sand. We put a line in the sand. You cannot cross this line. You cannot say these things. You cannot do these things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with those kinds of boundaries, because sometimes they are necessary. I'm not going to deny that. Sometimes we need boundaries like that. We need to make sure that certain people are not interacting with us. We need to make sure that we're not having certain types of conversations because it's not good for us at this point in time. Maybe down the road, we could revisit and possibly talk about it, but maybe you're not ready to yet, so you need to put a boundary up. That's okay. But if we realize that boundaries like that aren't really necessarily for us, instead, what we're doing is putting out expectations for how other people need to act. And that's something that we just can't control. We can try, we can request, we can ask, and in an ideal world, people will agree, they'll be nice, they'll understand. And I feel like most people probably are that way if you're upfront with them, if you're not getting in their face and yelling at them about it. It's different. Asking is different than demanding. And you can ask firmly. I'm not saying be a doormat and be like, oh, could you please be civil, but you can still be firm. and kind at the same time. But I've started to believe that the best boundaries are the boundaries that help us show up the way we want to show up, to embody the person that we want to be, to embody our highest selves. We're not always going to hit the mark 100% of the time. We're not going to always be what we might feel is our absolute best 100% of the time, and we should not expect that of ourselves. So don't think that I'm saying that. We should not expect ourselves to always 100% be our absolute best, highest self at all times. It's not possible. I believe we are, at this moment, our higher self, but that's a whole different discussion. So we have that ability, though, to lean into that, to step into that. So ask yourself, what does it feel like when you feel like you're being your highest self? How do you act? What do you say? How do you dress? How do you show up? How do you react in certain situations? How do you behave? How do you interact with other people in tough situations? Those are your best opportunities to show yourself who you really are and who you really can be. So I do believe, as I go into this next one, I do believe in protecting your space. If there's certain people that you know you need to keep out, then keep them out. Your boundaries are individual. Your boundaries are up to you. No one else should be able to tell you what your boundaries should be. Remember that as I go into this next part. I'm not a fan, and again, not telling you what to do, but I'm not a fan of when people pose an argument and conclude it with, if you don't agree with me, you need to leave. If you don't agree with me, I'm blocking you. If you don't agree with me, unfriend me or unfollow me. I believe you should be strong in who you are. I don't think there's anything in declaring who you are, what you stand for, sharing your message, fighting for what you believe is right, fighting against what you maybe believe is wrong. But it's the messaging. Because if we go back to the possibility of peace and unity ever existing, I know it sounds like a fantasy, and it's going to take a lot of collective work to get there. I know that. But I also believe that's why my soul is here. So I know that at some point in humanity, it's possible. It's where we're heading to. I'm getting chills as I'm saying that. It's possible. But we don't get there by belittling and shaming and intentionally dividing when it's not a necessary boundary. It's one thing to set boundaries for your safety. It's another thing to try to set a boundary just because you're annoyed, because not everybody agrees with you. I believe that true unity does not mean that we are all the same, that we all believe the same thing, that we all act the same way, that we all talk the same way, that we all like the same things. What would be the point of life on earth? What would be the point of incarnating our souls into human beings if we were all just going to be the same? What lessons would there be for our souls to learn? How would we evolve? I don't think we would. So true unity is all of us existing together and getting along, still being able to be in each other's company and to work towards common goals, to exist with each other, knowing that we might have different beliefs. And it's so hard to sum this up, because still, even in a podcast, because there's still caveats. Yeah, there's big global problems that I do think we're all going to, at some point, have to figure out how to agree on in order to eradicate certain things. Not getting into what I think those things are, because we might disagree. And right now, I don't think it's the point. But on an individual interaction level, there needs to be, I think, a better attempt at understanding. And I was thinking more about understanding too, because I don't think we should go into anything expecting that anyone owes us understanding. But on the flip side, if we go into it, we take on the responsibility. It's a choice. I don't think anyone should feel required to do it. I'm just saying, if we were to be willing to be the ones to set the example, of at least trying to understand where other people are coming from, that would make such a huge difference. You can understand somebody without having to agree with them. And that's the first step, I think, to everybody getting along. That's the first step to real unity. But so often people just want to argue. They just want to be right. They want to prove the other person wrong. And that's obviously not getting us anywhere. Now, I'm not saying I have it right. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm not claiming to have this all figured out. I know this makes it sound almost too simple. But I also think we overcomplicate things. What if we all took a collective breath and stepped back for a minute? Tried again. And I'm definitely not saying don't stand up for what you believe is right. I'm not saying don't fight against what you think is wrong. I think some things might be a little backwards. I think that some things that really aren't that big of a problem are hugely overblown, and other things that are an enormous problem aren't acknowledged enough. And again, with me being so generic about how I'm talking about it, we might have completely different ideas on what those things are. And I don't know that I want to get into that because I'll start crying. My overall point is just consider your messaging. Again, not trying to tell anyone what to do. It's your page. It's your life. I'm not your boss. And I don't want to be your boss. I really don't. I don't want to be anybody's boss. I'm just posing a thought of my own that if we want to affect change, the best way to do it is to consider how we're getting the message across, is to consider planting seeds and being an example without intentionally being an example. We be the bigger person. We go in first, doing everything from a place of love, from a place of at least trying to understand. There are things you will not change my position on, but I'm willing to at least try to understand. At least I like to think I am. I'm not saying I'm perfect in every situation. And as we talk about bigger and bigger problems in this world, there are things I'll probably be less understanding about. Because I'm not perfect. There are things that I believe there shouldn't be more than one side to certain problems. But can we maybe start on an individual level? Because that's how we start shifting the collective. We can't start on that larger scale and get smaller. We have to start small. Almost like that exercise where you take a candle and you start sharing the light from that one candle. And every candle stays lit, and the light spreads. Am I romanticizing this too much? I don't know. I hope not. I know we've gone on for a while, but I've been sitting here looking at my Work Your Light deck. I did want to pull a couple cards. I did mean to start with a card pull, but we're just going to do it now really quickly and see what comes up. I'm curious because there's cards in here about boundaries and about triggers. I let a bunch of cards jump out. What's interesting is the very first card is the no card. Wait, postpone, pause, say no. I feel like that's related to one of the tips that I gave in small hacks on how to keep your boundaries. One of the hacks is to take a pause before you answer anything, before you say yes to something that you know you don't want to say yes to. Find ways to let yourself take a pause. Take a break from social media. The next card that jumped out is protection. Protect your energy. Absolutely protect your energy. Protect your space. Set your boundaries. It says call back your power, cut the cords, soul retrieval. Let go of the things that you know you need to let go of. We also got the Great Gathering. It's all coming together. Intuitive hits, soul tribe, and keepers of the earth. You are not alone. Ancient ancestors stand beside you. So I get the message of support from that collectively we are all going to be working towards the greater good. I also got warrior woman. Have you answered your deepest calling? And the next card that jumped out was the yes card. So we started with the no card and we ended with the yes card. And it's right next to the warrior woman card. So yes, follow these intuitive hits. Speak up. Use your voice. Lean into your supports, both here in the human world and in the spiritual world. Protect your energy. Set your boundaries. But watch your messaging. I'm pointing at the no card as I say this. Watch your messaging, but don't give up. I'm pointing at the yes card as I say this. I don't know if this helps. I hope it does. I don't know if this made sense. I hope it made sense. Stand up for what you believe in. Follow your intuition. Lean into your guides for support. But take a break, take a pause before just rushing out. No bull in a china shop vibes. I shuffled 2 more because I wanted just a little more. Star Mother, how can you mother yourself? Take care of yourself. And the crumbling came out. What are you clinging on to? What can't you let go of? What are your triggers? What is making you feel like you need a boundary where maybe you don't really need one? Maybe you shouldn't need one because maybe things will be okay, but you're scared. You're scared to open up. You're scared to allow anything to shake up your beliefs. So instead of considering what the other belief means, instead of trying to understand where it comes from, you put up a wall. And maybe that wall needs to crumble, but you're not letting it. You're holding on to it. You're clinging on to it for dear life because your reality is just going to be so shaken if you let it crumble. It's right on top of the yes card, the way I laid them out, the way I dropped them out. Let it crumble. Soul Mother is laying over the warrior woman cards and the protection cards. Crumbling is over the yes card and technically leaning over the great gathering and keepers of the earth. You're supported as this crumbles. Let it go. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this one. I welcome your feedback. I welcome your thoughts. I don't welcome arguing, but I welcome your thoughts. So if you're not inside the Energy Within Facebook group, make sure that you jump in there. Make sure you answer the questions, because that's one way that I protect that space is I typically will not let you in unless I see you were invited by a friend, someone who I know that's already in the group. Even then, I would like you to answer the questions, but if you're coming in on your own and the questions are popping up, please just make sure you answer them. If you don't want to give me your email address, you don't have to, but at least answer the question prompts. Make sure you're following me on Instagram. It's I am Carrie Jokala. So my old account, which is just Carrie_Jokala, is still on there, but I don't use it anymore, and it does prompt you to go to the other one. So it's I am Carrie Jokala. And do I ask you to give this one a rating and a review? Here's my boundary, only positive ones. All right, I have gone on long enough, so this is where I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.